Friday Night Racing
on Off the Ball.
Brought to you by Horse Racing Ireland. Love every racing moment. Visit hri.ie.
Yes, indeed. You're welcome along to this week's edition of Friday Night Racing. It's Ger and Johnny with you in studio. We'll talk about the big stories in racing a little bit later on. And of course, a reminder that Friday Night Racing on Off the Ball is brought to you by Horse Racing Ireland. Love every racing moment. Visit hri.ie. Make sure you follow the Twitter account at HRI Racing, and the hashtag is every racing moment. Now, our guest this week is Frances Crowley, who's just contributed the final chapter to the brilliant new memoir Champion. It is the story of her late husband's brilliant career, and I'm delighted to say Frances Crowley is with us. Frances, the book that Pat wrote with Don was obviously in the works for a long time, but you needed to contribute to it yourself, to put some extra context on it. And it's a stunning final chapter. I've just read it today and I'm totally emotional. I haven't read it. How did you manage to be able to commit to print the details of everything that you've included there? It's so stunningly beautiful, but it must have been incredibly hard to write.
Well, it was hard to write, actually, but I think also it was a little bit therapeutic, and I had a funny kind of feeling that I needed to write everything down that happened. So in that way, it was probably good for me. And it was hard, and certain parts of it were very hard, but I'm glad I did it now. But also Pat and Don did all the hard work, and I think I'm probably getting the easy part now here.
How long ago was the decision made to write the book? Because it's an incredible career, and you want to do justice to the full sweep of it. But obviously, there's also the narrative of what Pat is going through at the same time as well.
Yeah, so Bruff Scott contacted Pat and asked him would he be interested in doing the book, and I think at the time Pat was a little bit, who'd want to read about me? I'm kind of boring. I haven't done anything that exciting. But Bruff persuaded him, and Don and Pat started working on it. I suppose it would have been a good year before he died, and they started working with a 2-hour conversation. I think it was every 2 weeks they'd sit down together, and the process actually was really good for Pat at the time. And I remember just thinking, gosh, like he's getting to relive his whole life. Like, it was brilliant for him, really, and they worked really well together. And I think Don did a great job, because the feedback I'm getting anyway is that people are saying they can hear Pat in the book. They feel like he's sitting beside them, and they really love it, I think.
It's funny, you talked about his initial response being, what have I done? That's actually one of the things that struck me from the book, is he talks about not being particularly confident at any stage, and always kind of being constantly driven by what other people were doing. When he arrived, he looked up to Mick Kinnan and a few others, Johnny Murtagh, and then it was rivalry with his nephew later on. It's funny how that kind of level of honesty about somebody who was clearly one of the greatest jockeys that we're ever going to see. Was that humility? What do you think that was? That quality that prevented him ever from feeling totally confident, but obviously he had confidence in his own ability at the same time.
Yeah, well, I think that's. I think a lot of sports people, if you were to really question them, would admit to that. I think confidence is such a huge part of being a sports person, and especially a jockey, because you transmit that confidence to the horse. But I think most sports people will admit that they will have a feeling of not being good enough, and it's even watching Frankie Dettori's documentary the other night, which I thought was great. He went through a crisis of confidence as well, and I think. And you're always going to be looking at that person, your rival, and wondering, are you as good as them? And I think it's being able to overcome that and have great belief in yourself that kind of makes the good really great.
Yeah, I suppose the weighing room has been in the news a lot, obviously this week, Frances, but there, in general, like you look at these characters, there is kind of generally humility. It's almost like you'd never be allowed almost to get ahead of your station, and because you might be riding. I always find that really interesting when a jockey, like if Pat won the Irish Derby on Grey Swallow, he might be riding in a handicap within 20 minutes, and he just has to get on with it. And that's kind of the way racing is as well, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's you've heard the saying before, you're only as good as your last winner, and that's perfectly true. No matter what kind of a big win you've had, you could absolutely give the next ride a terrible ride, and you'll be right back down at the bottom again. So and that's why confidence is such a huge thing, I think, as well with jockeys. But Pat writes about the weighing room a little bit, I think, and he would have had great camaraderie with all the jockeys in the weighing room, and I think he said that they were the fiercest of rivals on the track, but off the track there was he had great friends in the weighing room.
His relationship with Joseph is another interesting bit in the book as well. It's a short enough part, but it was clear that they were driving each other on, that there was a competitive instinct that I'm making this point a little bit earlier on. We were talking to one of the Galway hurlers who's just won a title underneath the management of his brother, who he used to play with, and sometimes you'll say stuff to your family that you wouldn't say to other people, because at the end they kind of have to forgive you.
Yeah, well, I'm not sure if he would have said anything to Joseph that he wouldn't have said to anybody else, because he was very close to them all. But at the time, himself and Joseph, every race they went out on, they were probably on the first and second favourites. So, it was very intense there for a while. And but they off the track, then they were the best of friends as well. So, but it was very intense for a while, I think. Yeah,
I'd say you were all delighted when Joseph decided to go training full time.
Yeah, I'm sure lots of trainers weren't so delighted, but the jockeys certainly breathed a sigh of relief, I'd say.
One thing that struck me when Pat was ill, and I think so many sports people can relate to this, France, as well. And like I just get the impression, even from talking to kind of young football managers in the League of Ireland now, that it's completely all consuming. And I always kind of text them, and I might say, be conscious of your family, and be conscious of that this is it's ultimately it's sport. It's it's not the be all and end all. And what really struck me was that Pat started to talk about that it gave him the chance to almost reclaim that family time that he'd abandoned in the pursuit of the single-minded pursuit of winners. Did you see that change with him then as he got ill?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And, it's easy for you to say that it's not the be all and the end all. But, if it isn't the be all and the end all, when you're a sports person, you're not going to be successful. So,
exactly.
So it has to be. But yeah, obviously when he got sick and he had time to spend with us and to spend on the farm, of course he was a completely different person,
But I guess like, what's it like being the son or the daughter of, a professional sports person who has so much pressure in his or her life that it's a single-minded pursuit, and obviously you've the family time as well, but I don't want to kind of talk too much about politics or whatever. I'm reading the Charlie Haughey book at the moment, which is incredible reading. But what really strikes me is the role of the wife bringing up the kids and all that battle at home when the person is gone all day, every day. And what was it like for you bringing up the kids? Because I know you were a trainer in your own right, but Pat was gone a lot.
He was gone a lot, and we just got on with it. We accepted that we were sort of, you had to take second place in his life, and we knew that, and we were happy with that. We certainly weren't going to cause any more friction or make it more difficult for him. He was trying to do his job, and we were just trying to facilitate that as best as we could. And that's the truth, because I grew up in it, and I knew that was the way, and I didn't expect it to be any different at all. Yeah,
you kind of, as you say, when your dad, Joe, obviously it wasn't something that was entirely new to you when you married into the life of being married to, one of the top jockeys.
No, wasn't. And my poor mother, who didn't come from that background, really struggled with the fact that it was horses. I do remember her saying that a lot, just can we ever just maybe not talk about them, or can we do something different, or, could
No was the answer, I guess, was it?
No, no. And I'm afraid she got very little backup from us at the time as well.
It just strikes me that it's not spoken about that much, because it's you are so single-minded. But as you say, France, the flip side of it is Pat Smullen wasn't Pat Smullen unless he had that attitude, I suppose.
No, he was. No, and he wouldn't have been happy. I mean, in a lot of ways, as a jockey at that level, you kind of don't be happy a lot of the time anyway, because you're always trying to be better. You're always trying to be the best, and it's a tough life. But he certainly wouldn't have been happy if he wasn't at the top, and that's the way he had to be to get to the top. So I suppose it's a bit of a vicious circle, I suppose.
I'm very interested in this, because you did understand what the requirements were to be successful, and Johnny briefly mentioned your training background as well. Like,
you only trained a classic winner.
Well, that's what I was going to say. This is you have a very deep understanding of what's required to be successful in this sport. And it strikes me that actually that was a partnership, that you kind of obviously had an arrangement where you understood that for the absolute most success to happen, that there were responsibilities, and those responsibilities were divided. That's what it sounds like.
Yeah, that's what it was. I was training, and I think when I found that I couldn't do it, I couldn't do everything properly. I couldn't be there for Pat and kind of protect him from all the things that would go on in the yard, all the injuries and things that I knew he kind of couldn't cope with and do his career as well. So doing that and being a mother and, being a trainer wasn't possible. When I saw that I was missing things and I wasn't doing them properly, that was when I decided that, I had to give up. And much and all, as it kind of went against my nature to be a housewife as such, I knew that he needed someone behind him. So, and we were grateful for the life of him being a successful jockey and what it gave us. So, we all had to pull our weight.
I think that's just very selfless. I think it's because, I guess in any good marriage, there's a bit of give, bit of take or whatever, but like ultimately you kind of sacrifice your own career for his betterment.
Yeah, well, I mean, I suppose, as he often said, that if he hadn't been such a successful jockey, we could have been a great team as a training family, and that, I think that's true. But on the other hand, I often think we were a good team anyway. Only the team was that he was a champion jockey, and I was part of his team with that, I think. So look, I mean, I loved him. I loved being married to him, and I loved going racing and kind of basking in his limelight, as well. So it wasn't a huge sacrifice, I don't think.
Do you think you'd ever go back training?
No. No, I wouldn't. It's a tough life, and there's so much more to it even than when I was training. Just the bureaucracy, the paperwork, like everything to do with all the ins and outs of it. Now I just couldn't go back doing it, and contrary to belief, like it doesn't pay that well. It's there's not a huge reward. It's really a way of life more than a well-paying career.
It is a way of life, isn't it? Like that's
yeah.
And in a way, I suppose that's the other thing. You knew exactly what was required to be successful at that level because you're from the family background that you're from, and that, I presume, helped to inform the decisions that you would have made as a couple along the way to make sure that Pat was getting the best out of his career too.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, look, I mean, I think like all I could do really was be there for him and not trying to interfere too much, and I'd like to think that, he'd ask me, say, if I'd seen a race, like, if he was worried that maybe, he could have done something better or that, like, I always felt my job as well was to really keep his confidence as high as possible, a bit like, I suppose, like a bit like the job of an agent, I think is there to, to absorb any bad things that are said and just to let him know the good things. I really believe confidence is a huge thing with jockeys, and I used to try and keep that part of it as good as possible.
So you're a psychologist as well.
Oh yeah.
That's hard though. Like, that is hard because there's you've got your own frustrations as well, no doubt, and a big race has been lost and you want to vent about whatever, and it's like, okay, I'm going to choose my moment here to make sure that we get through this little squall, and then afterwards I will take my time to vent.
Yeah. No, I didn't vent. No, I didn't. No, if you knew Pat, I'd like that he was hard on himself, and if he did something wrong, like, he certainly didn't need someone else telling him that as well,
Can I ask as well, in terms of Sarah, Hannah and Paddy, and I know friends of mine who lost a parent when they were young, and I can kind of only speculate as to the journey that they had to go through. And from your perspective, you had this long process of realising that Pat was very sick. Then you had the grief of losing the man in your life. But the kids, what's that challenge like then to kind of, like, I guess, assess how they are and realise that I guess you're all suffering and it's different for them than it would be, I suppose, for you?
Yeah, it is. My role in it, I suppose I think I always think of when Pat was sick, and if he was in good form and well and happy, it kind of set the mood in the house. And I always feel that the kids look to me a little bit now to set the tone in the house. And I do feel that I can't be going around crying, although there are times when they're being asked what they want for dinner, and there'll be tears streaming down your face. But, I think that's okay too. But in general, I do feel I have to, be in good form and be in good humour for them, because otherwise they will be sad. And I did realise that a few times. And when you make an effort to be happy for somebody else, then it's like putting a smile on your face. You're actually going to feel a bit better yourself then.
And do you when you say that they want probably nice chips for the dinner or whatever, and nice chicken nuggets or whatever, and you're crying, like, is that something that just happens kind of? Is it just a moment that comes to your mind sometime where you have a memory, or is it kind of arbitrary, or is it something that just could be kind of random?
Yeah, often it can be something very random, and like, they're very good. I'll have one of them coming over and give me a hug, to make me feel better. Like, that's the way it works. And and then you could have just a really bad day where you just want to cry all day, and that happens the odd time, but that happens with them too. I can kind of see it in them. They might be a bit angry for no reason at all, and that's when I recognise they're kind of having a little bad day, so.
And are you a Netflix fan?
Not really.
So
No.
I got into this show on Netflix called Made recently, and it was really bad, but it was kind of like when you were, I don't know, when you started digging, you just kept digging, and I think there were like 10 episodes, and after the 6th episode I thought it was nearly over, and after the 7th episode I thought, this is nearly over. But then it was just, well, I've watched so much of it, and it didn't really get any better. But at the end, basically, there's this young kind of struggling single mother, but she gets all these other kind of women around in this room, and they have a chat, and she just says, I want you to write a story. And she says, when I write, basically stuff comes out from my mind that I wouldn't be able to actually, like, put into words in any shape or form, or put into meaning without writing it. And she found, like, that by just writing something, that's my therapy. That's basically me coming to terms with what's in my mind. Was that like that for you?
Definitely was, yeah. Writing the last little bit for the book definitely was like that. And because I remember somebody asked me to talk about it. Like, it's very hard to talk about that, Pat dying and the funeral and everything. But writing it down definitely was, it wasn't easy, but it was good. I think it was definitely therapeutic for me. Yeah.
It's also something that at some stage the kids will be able to read.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. It's you know, the younger two won't even look in the direction of the book right now, but they'll have it. It'll be there for them, and that's one of the reasons I really wanted Pat to do the book. Obviously, at the time, I really was thinking that he wouldn't die, and you know that we'd have a happy ending. But and that's the other thing, is I kind of wanted there to be a happy ending. So I wanted to show that, yeah, he died, but we really do feel he's still here. You know, there kind of is a happy ending there, you know.
Can I ask you about that, actually, Frances? Because I was on the Independent's website, I think, last Monday, and at that particular time, your interview and your story about the book, and particularly the line, which was the headline, which was something to the effect of, you know, Pat's gone to such an amazing place, I think he wants us to know about it. And I think that headline, you know, I'd say 99% of the people who read that article probably have no interest in racing, and probably very many of them have had grief in their lives, possibly extreme grief, where they want to feel that belief that there is that other space there, that Pat is still around, and that it was a really arresting headline, I thought.
Yeah, I mean, what I tried to do was just to say these are the things that happened, and you know, we know that he was telling us that he, like, I do feel he suffered so much that when he did get that piece, that it was like it was really amazing for him, and he really had to let us know that everything was okay. So yeah, I mean, I think it's not something like I never, like, not something I ever expected, but I just wanted to say, do you know what, these things happened, and you can take them as you want, but at the end of the day, I think there is something out there. Like, there is a lot more than we know right there, and we're all going to die. So, you know,
I just think that's very powerful. I just think it's very powerful because, like, the prospect of just this entire blackness is so horrific for anyone to deal with, that I think for you to believe that, and even the most cynical person out there will take comfort from that, because I think even that makes people happier to read that.
Yeah, and I mean, you know, Pat, to be honest, Pat and I, we weren't able to talk about dying. We weren't able to talk about death, which I kind of wish we could have, but we just didn't know how to talk about it. And I know Pat was afraid to die, and I know he worried about, you know, of course he worried about what was out there, what was next. Do you just disappear? You know, he didn't want to die. And, you know, so I think, you know, that also was, you know, I think it was like a huge relief for him, or, you know, to find that, you know, that actually it's quite nice, I think.
It's an incredible last chapter. Like, you know, Johnny knows me very well. I am one of those most cynical people in the world, and I was completely overwhelmed reading that. And I think what you've done is you've opened up a conversation that people will be able to start talking about death. Pat Smullen's very famous, and his fundraising in the last year of his life was incredible, and the fact that it went to proper research, that this was like, it's actually making a change, and there's loads of stuff that people can do research on and see that the change that the money that he's raised is making, and for him to bear that so publicly, while at the same time you're telling us now how much pain he was going through, and the pain that you have carried and will continue to carry, but the joy that you feel in being able to see these things and talk about it is unbelievably powerful, I think. And you know, it's a brilliant final chapter, and I'm so glad that you got some relief from it as well, because, you know, we read loads of sports books about sports people, but I think for you and for your family and for the people who read this is going to be special. So I just want to say thanks. It was great.
You're welcome. And you know, that's exactly what I wanted to do, was actually, put it out there and open the conversation, because I just kept saying to myself, why did nobody ever tell me that these kind of things could have happened? Like, you know, it actually would have brought Pat a bit of comfort if he maybe knew. Now, maybe he wouldn't have believed it, but
he's a cynical old soul possible as well. Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's a bit like you have to experience it to really believe it. And I kind of feel a bit blessed that I did experience those things. I feel like it's a gift from Pat to us. And, you know, maybe a lot of people reading it will probably say, like, she has finally lost it, like, what a fruitcake. But I feel like it's a gift from Pat.
Yeah, you have that day at the Curragh as well. Just like I'll never forget that fundraising day of Irish Champions Weekend. Like, I was genuinely in the press room looking at Tony McCoy welling up and like really struggling myself to hold it in, because there were maybe 10,000 people there that day. But I've never been at a sporting occasion that was so fraught with what was at stake here and what Pat was doing. And I remember going in that day and having the crack with him about Dermot Weld, and he was laughing away, and you sensed he might be fighting a tough battle himself, but that fun was there. But just the legacy of what he achieved, and as Ger says, it made a difference. It really made a difference. And Pat's not around, but he's still around. He's still making a difference, because what he did is making a difference to people's lives.
Yeah, like, that was a massive day. It was brilliant. And it was so emotional, and it was a really brilliant day in so many ways, like for the Curragh, and the amount of money raised. And although it was very hard on Pat, I think because he really was looking forward to riding in that race, it really meant a lot to him. And I think he'd be really happy with what the money is being used for. And I kind of think, and I know he had no power over this, but the fact that he died the exact same day a year later is kind of uncanny. I think it kind of in a funny way shows the significance of the day.
Totally. Frances, we let you go. You've been great with your time. Thanks a million. I hope everybody who's listening to this gets a chance to read the book at some stage. And well done. Thanks a million for talking to us today.
You're welcome. Thanks very much. Thank you.
It's Frances Crowley there, of course, a trainer in her own right, and she's contributed the last chapter to Pat Smullen's memoir with Don McLean, and
amazing people.
I just found it really hard to read that. It's heartbreaking. Like,
just think that I know I mentioned the Haughey book there, but like what Maureen Haughey did in terms of bringing up kids when Charlie was away the whole time just started me thinking about like all these kind of the silent partners in these relationships that like they don't get 0.1% of any media coverage, but like Frances is a completely phenomenal woman, and Pat wouldn't have been what he was but for her. And it's kind of interesting that she does make the point, because when Pat got sick, he was like, I've effectively half abandoned my family here. I didn't realise that I was so driven by winners. But then you flip that around, and if he didn't have that drive, he wouldn't have been the jockey he was, and that is the life, I suppose, that he was in.
Yeah, that's the constant tension in sports people's lives. Right, a reminder, Friday Night Racing is brought to you by Horse Racing Ireland. If you want to get in touch with us, by the way, you can text the show on 53106, or you can always leave a comment in the YouTube stream. We stream every Friday afternoon at 3 o'clock, and then we are also broadcast every Friday evening from 8 on Off the Ball on Newstalk. Now, it turns out you had a good weekend last weekend, Johnny. A Grade 1 win from Allaho in the John Durkin Memorial Chase at Punchestown on Sunday delivered 29.8 points for you to maintain your comfortable early season lead.
Tag unassailable
in the tote 10 to follow. Unstoppable juggernaut. So, sorry, it's going to read the last bit of it. Your other pick, Fernie Hollow, also winning on the day. Scored a further 12.6 points. So it is actually...
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Your 10 to follow stable is clearly the one to beat as we head to the Christmas racing season. So you're 135 points for the radio listeners in number 1. Number 2 is Danny Mullins on 95. And number 3 on 43 points. A miserly 43 points is me.
Did you have Envoi Len?
26,667th of the...
Envoi Len...
me and 20,000 of my closest friends.
Yeah. That's a long way to go, Joe.
I actually can't remember.
Long way to go. I don't know, I did the bubble slightly burst with him, but it was a great weekend of racing. Like, just Cheveley Park running Allaho against Envoi Len. I wish other owners would do that. I know they're different stables. It was great for the sport, and I have to say I was watching it from home. Mobility isn't the May West at the moment, and like, you're watching an RTE, and it's Ruby, Barry Geraghty, Andrew McNamara, and they did a kind of a concise 2-hour show with racing from Cork and Fairyhouse, but it was really gripping stuff. And I have to say, Ruby's grown into a very, very good presenter. He's like, I have deep resentment for somebody who just, do you know, like he's like he if you're talking about Pat Smullen, Ruby had an incredible drive, but he's really putting, like, it's not easy to present. I've done bits for myself. It's a completely different ball game, particularly in front of a camera. If not a duck to water, he's making a fair old show of it.
We should talk about the Robbie Dunn, Bryony Frost case. It was the other big news that came out this week. There's 7 days to appeal, so that's from yesterday. I don't know if there's been any indication formally yet.
Yeah, I don't know actually. I heard Adrian on about it here this morning on OTB AM as well. It's complex. It's complex because we mentioned Tony McCoy. I don't think he covered himself in glory this week, to be honest. I thought his tweet, which if you're not, he basically tweeted his support for the valets or whatever, and one couldn't but infer what he meant from that if you read the Bryony Frost case, because I'm a bit like a lot of racing. I'm just a bit sad about this, and I'm kind of torn. On one level, I've an awful lot of sympathy for Bryony, and I think she won't go into weighing rooms now without, some people will just not really look at her, unfortunately.
And that's the history of whistleblowers. But ultimately, the whistleblowers come to be seen as massive agents of change for the better in their sport. And there's a kind of, it is a rehash of the conversation we had a couple of weeks ago. Big opportunity for racing now to say, we have this safe space where we're going to make sure that the facilities are excellent and that any potential issues at one level are dealt with from a physical thing, and then we've taken all these other measures so that if there are any ever issues with anybody who feels like they're being bullied, then they can come forward, and there is this process by which we are going to deal with it. And it turns out that almost all organisations, and particularly all sports organisations, have been through this at various stages all around the world. So the template for how to come out of a scenario like this is right there. If racing has, particularly British racing, has the humility to turn around and say, we need help with this and we need to fix it. And
yeah,
and I'm not sure that's happening.
Well,
it feels like a very defensive response.
The Jockeys Association response, the PGA was interesting, but again, I'm not sure the PGA really has dealt with this all that well either, in that it was, I think it was like kind of worried about the
PGA is the Professional Jockeys Association.
So I'm not sure it's really represented Bryony as well as it should have here, notwithstanding the fact that there are an awful lot of jockeys who aren't satisfied with the outcome of this case and think that, you know, he has the right to appeal Robert Dunn or whatever. But I don't think their conduct was great. I have my own views on it, you know, but you know, Bryony has done something here that I think one way or the other will be fantastic for racing, because the last sort of month or so we've had, and we spoke about this, Ger, like Henry de Bromhead bringing over these horses for the British racing is all about Saturdays. Like, everyone is watching it on terrestrial TV, or certainly that was the case. And we've Bridget Andrews, Bryony Frost and Rachel Blackmore in the last month or so winning the big races on Saturdays. 3 female jockeys. And I think Bryony now has become such a focal point for people who will become interested in racing, because a female jockey took a stand on this and was brave enough to take on what was effectively a very anachronistic system. But hopefully people might stay tuned in now and track her career, because she, regardless of whatever your views are on the case, and I think it's respectful that people have different views in it, I think it was really brave what she did.
Okay. Right. Should we talk about some of the actual racing this weekend?
So there isn't much actually. So Cheltenham and no Irish racing on Sunday. I have to say I'm not really sure why that is. It might be just one of the days off for the stable staff. But Cheltenham obviously, and cracking card at Fairyhouse tomorrow. Fairyhouse tomorrow. Statler is making his chase debut. Paul Townend returns to the fray. He's been out for a while. He's kind of been eased back into action. He's riding Blue Lord in the first race, first time tongue tie, and that'll be quite interesting. Statler then, hell of a book of rides for Paul to come back into, and I think I was looking it up today, he's a long way off I think he's about 22 points off 22 winners off the lead, which is set by Darragh O'Keefe, but he's still sort of hot favourite. Having said that, Rachel Blackmore, I think, is, you know, she's in second place, so she'd have a good chance as well. And like last weekend's racing was brilliant, and we're kind of getting going. Good racing at Cheltenham as well this weekend.
Okay, all right. Anything else?
Not much else. How'd you get on at Gavin Cromwell's?
We were down in Gavin Cromwell's. We were supposed to be a duo down in Gavin Cromwell's, but you...
Yeah.
I missed you, Johnny.
Everything's happening a bit slower at the moment.
You didn't make it.
Just for the people, if they're still listening in, what's it like to visit a racing yard early in the morning in the winter? It's nice, isn't it?
It's amazing. Well, so we were down on Thursday morning, and obviously Tuesday and Wednesday had been the storm, and everything was calm, and the sun gently rose in the distance. And you're like, wow, this is absolutely amazing. And the sounds and the sights of the yard are just like mesmeric.
It is.
Really
I just think we need to bring more kids to that experience, because I think a lot of them will be kind of hooked. The beauty of the horse and just that atmosphere in early morning, where a lot of the time the racing trainer has his day's work done when you're kind of getting out of bed, you know.
Yeah. No, totally.
Like I mean me, but
yeah, you didn't get out of bed.
I wasn't really getting to that, but I was kind of on a work-related trip the night before, and it just
now we're getting the story, are you?
in the work anyway. Yeah, but me and Gavin, Gavin's already had words with me, so I owe him a bill.
Excellent. On that note, that's this week's edition of Friday Night Racing, which is brought to you by Horse Racing Ireland. Love every racing moment. Visit hri.ie. We will actually be bringing you the video that we made from our visit to Gavin Cromwell's yard. It looks spectacular, and we'll get the inside track on where Flooring Porter is going to end up at Christmas, because entered for both, I think, Limerick and also for Leopardstown. So we'll see. I'll get you the information on that. And look, do yourselves a favour, get your hands on a copy of Champion and make sure you read the whole way through to the end. The last chapter, I just read it before we came on. That's why I was like completely overwhelmed by it. It's heartbreaking, but it's necessary that you read it, and sometimes remember that there is more in this life than the stuff that we do every day.
And after, hopefully.
See you next week.
Friday Night Racing
on Off the Ball.
brought to you by Horse Racing Ireland. Love every racing moment. Visit hri.ie.